There is a moment the world cannot see, a quiet flicker, a subtle withdrawal behind the eyes, a soft pause in the middle of a conversation where nothing is said, but everything shifts. It is the moment when someone becomes overwhelmed, not in the dramatic sense, not in the way movies portray the breaking point, but in the small, almost invisible way a person pulls back into themselves when everything around them begins to feel too loud, too fast, too much. Some people retreat, not because they don't care, not because they are fragile, but because stepping back is the only way they know to stay intact. And this pattern, though often misunderstood, has a story, a psychology, a quiet logic rooted in both human biology and the emotional history carried inside the body. You've seen it, in someone you love, or maybe in yourself. The subtle pause before they answer, the way they look away as if searching for a door that only they can see, the softness in their voice as it begins to fade, no longer able to hold the weight of the moment. Overwhelm rarely announces itself loudly. It arrives quietly like a shadow creeping across the mind. Emotional rooms begin to shrink. Thoughts start racing or scattering. Sensations blur together into a single feeling that whispers, "This is too much." And so they retreat into silence, into distance, into a place where the world feels softer again. But the retreat is not an escape. It is a signal, a sign that something inside them is struggling to keep up. Almost every retreat has a beginning long before the moment it appears. It can be traced to childhood, where the nervous system first learned what danger felt like. Not just physical danger, but emotional uncertainty, inconsistency, or environments where feelings were too big, too dismissed, or too unsafe to express. Some children grew up in noisy households where conflict erupted quickly. Others lived in quiet homes where emotions were never spoken aloud. Some were praised for being low maintenance, independent, or strong, not realizing that these traits were born not from ease, but from adaptation. A child who learned that retreating kept the peace grew into an adult who withdraws to survive the storm inside them. A child who learned that speaking up made things worse grew into an adult who carries their overwhelm in silence. A child who learned that their emotions were too much grew into an adult who now feels the world is too much. The nervous system remembers, and when life becomes overwhelming, the body repeats its oldest language. Step back, stay small, stay safe. From a psychological standpoint, retreat is not weakness. It is regulation. The human nervous system was built to protect. When the brain senses threat, whether real or emotional, it shifts into survival states: fight, flight, freeze, or the gentlest and least understood of them all, fawn and withdraw. For some, overwhelm activates adrenaline, pushing them outward. They argue, they react, they try to change the external world. For others, overwhelm activates shutdown. The parasympathetic system steps in. The mind slows. The body grows heavy. Thoughts become fog-like. Speech becomes effort. Retreat is the nervous system pulling the emergency brake. It happens when cognitive load is exceeded, when emotional stimuli stack too high, or when the brain cannot process fast enough to stay emotionally present. It is the mind's version of a deep breath, even when no breath is taken. On the surface, it looks like avoidance, but internally it is recalibration, a temporary shelter, a quiet psychological pause where the person's mind attempts to return to equilibrium. But the retreat is rarely simple, because while withdrawing protects them, it also isolates them. They pull back to feel safe, yet simultaneously feel guilty for pulling back at all. They want space, but fear that distance will be misunderstood. They need quiet, but worry silence might hurt someone they care about. Inside them, two voices argue. One says, "You need to step away," The other says, "You're going to disappoint someone again." One says, "This is the only way to breathe." The other says, "Why can't you be stronger?" So they float between closeness and distance, connection and isolation, longing and self-protection. It can feel like standing behind a glass wall, able to see the world clearly, yet unable to step back into it until the internal storm passes. And because this conflict is invisible, others misread it. They see withdrawal as rejection, silence as disinterest, distance as a lack of care. But inside, the person is often holding on gently to every connection they have, hoping no one mistakes their retreat for indifference. What changes everything is a quiet realization. Retreating doesn't mean one is broken. It means they reached a threshold. Everyone has one. Just not everyone reaches theirs at the same speed or with the same intensity. For some, the threshold is low because emotional sensitivity is high. For others, the threshold is shaped by years of stress, trauma, or responsibility. For many, it shifts depending on the season of life they're in. The turning point arrives when they begin to understand that retreat isn't abandonment of others. It's an attempt to not abandon themselves. It is the mind saying, "Let me come back to myself before I come back to you." It is the heart saying, "I still care. I'm just overwhelmed." It is the nervous system saying, "I need a moment so I can stay whole." And slowly they learn to recognize the signs earlier. The tightening in the chest, the rising heat behind the face, the sudden loss of words, the growing desire to disappear for a while. Understanding gives shape to the storm, and once the storm has shape, it is no longer as terrifying as before. Over time, something gentle occurs. The person begins to integrate their retreat instead of fighting it. They stop labeling themselves as difficult or distant. They start seeing their withdrawal as a part of their emotional rhythm, as natural and valid as needing rest after a long day. Healing doesn't mean they stop retreating. It means the retreat becomes conscious, kind, less filled with shame. They learn to communicate softly, not to justify, but to ease the fear of being misunderstood. They recognize that solitude can be a form of care, and that returning after retreat is an act of courage. They begin to trust that people who truly see them won't mistake their quiet moments for coldness, and little by little they move through the world differently. Less afraid of overwhelm, less afraid of their internal tides, more accepting of the way their mind seeks safety, not fixed, just understood. In the end, retreat is simply one of the ways a soul protects its softness. Some hearts were built like armor, others were built like water, and water does not break. It flows, it recedes, it returns. People who retreat when overwhelmed are not fragile. They are perceptive, sensitive to the emotional climates around them, attuned to the shifts that others overlook. Their withdrawal is not the closing of a door, it is the quiet turning of a page, a pause, a breath, a soft return to the self before returning to the world, and when they step back into the light, even if they say nothing, there is a certain calmness that follows them, a kind of quiet wisdom shaped by the storms they survived inside their own mind. They are not running away. They are finding their way back,